Hello again, it's Mr. Pete 222, also known as tubalcain. Welcome back to the shop, and this is tips number 471. It's the second part of disassembling and rebuilding the pull gear speed reducer here. Now hopefully you've watched the first part, which was tips 470, and this is a continuation, and I'm not sure just exactly how many more videos there will be in this series, depending on how fast I work, or should I say how slowly I work. Well, in the last part, the first part, I separated this. You saw me do that. And then I also, I believe it was off camera, removed this bad bearing. I just simply drove it out from this side, which was simple enough. I still haven't cleaned things up, but this bearing is bad. It's just rougher than a cob, so that has to be replaced along with two others, and I'll use sealed bearings. Many of you, if not all of you, have watched my two pleas for help, and those are temporary videos. People are asking me not to take them off. I haven't decided yet, but there were an awful lot of responses on the first one. Like 16,000 people watched it, and hundreds of comments. Many of them are repetitious of one another. Go through and read those if you like that. It's pretty interesting, really. And I think it was a challenge to many people to help me, and I appreciate it very much. But now I'm forging ahead, and the next thing I'm going to do is to clean these up, of course, with thinner, but I'll do that off camera. But looking here, you can see the planetary gears. The reason there's two pairs is that it reverses the rotation, so you don't have to run the motor in reverse. I've said that before. So the next thing I want to do is to remove this, and I had some good suggestions on that, so here's how I think I'll approach it. The whole idea now is I want to remove this bar, but the pin here has been peened over. So people suggested cutting it off, grinding it off, peening it down to submission so this will come off. And I think I'm just going to file around it so this will pull off. And I may very well redesign this when I put it together, because someone showed me a picture of one that either had been modified or they changed the design from the factory and in fact made the rod threaded. It might have been a larger diameter rod as well, and it had a little knurled nut on there, kind of like what you would see on battery posts years ago, small, 6 or dry cells, like on a dry cell. So it could easily be either adjusted for tension or to disassemble it. I don't know the purpose or anything about it other than people sent me a lot of pictures, and I'm so appreciative of that. But after I get this off, that's when I intend to press from this side and see if I can get it apart. I only have a small mechanical Dake brand arbor press number 0, which is only 1.5 ton. I doubt that it's got the pressure, but I'll probably will heat this up anyway. But what I'll do now off camera is just to take a little needle file and file that the head off of this so that this will pull off. That's how I'm going to do it. Even if I remove a little bit or would snip it off, there might be enough left there to salvage it, but that's something that I'll worry about later on as I reassemble it. You know what, that only took 60 seconds of filing, and I believe it's just going to come off now. And that needs to either be reworked or just cleaned up or something, but it's rougher than a cob. Now, before I get back to this, let me just say that on this, you know that Bubba got a hold of this. We talked about that before. And Bubba is a rough worker, but he broke this. And Jim Bollinger, I just got an email this morning from Jim Bollinger, and he said, "You want me to TIG weld that for you?" And then he said, "Of course, you'll have to machine it." Well, at this time, and I thank you, Jim, and I'm talking about Jim of Do Right Machining. What a great guy he is. He's a big man, and you see what a wonderful father he is? And boy, if only we had more fathers like that in this country that spent time and effort with their boys, we'd have a lot less crime, I tell you. And thank you for that, Jim. At this time, I'm not going to do it. I just like to get things like this done. And at my age, I can't tarry. So that won't get welded yet at this time. Now the question here is, when I release the Vise grip pliers, is that going to disappear to where I can't even grab it anymore? I think there'll still be a little bit left sticking up. Wrong. She came flying out of this end. All right. I didn't know that it would come out. I was thinking that was a blind hole, even though I looked at the drawing. Now remember, and I'll put the drawing again in this video, that's a patent drawing. The patent drawing, as many people have pointed out, is not a working drawing. It was a concept drawing. It is not a dimension drawing. Many parts of it were changed in any patent, not just this one. So we can't totally go by that. But that's all there is to that little plunger. It's a fairly strong spring. All right, we'll set that aside. Looking at this now, what I'm going to try to do now is to press it out from this side. I don't do a lot of press work, but this is the time every 2 years when I need a hydraulic press, but they're cheap enough at Harbor Freight, Horror Freight, where I could get one, but they're just in the way. That's the problem. It's just in the way 99% of the time. I just turned this down in the lathe so it would fit here. And I know it's not long enough. I got another piece standing side by side, but I just want to see if it's a go or no go. And the question here is, am I going to just press out the steel part or the brass part? The brass bushing. And the other question is, should I attempt to press it out of this bearing? In other words, just support it with a ring around this bearing, something like this, like my fingers, and push. Or should I support it clear around the edge here in a manner using this flask? This is one of my foundry flasks, just happens to be about the right size to press, but this is a most awkward piece to set in my little press. So I'm still playing around. Or should I forget the press altogether and use one of my bigger pullers? That's setting on this right now, so I got to shore it up a little bit. Or should I use one of my big pullers and push right here with a puller? So I may have to back up and use a puller rather than the press, because you know I got one that's pretty darn big, and but I prefer a fine thread on it. I believe that one has a coarse thread. So anyway, I'll go out to the press now. That's out in the garage, and just give this a little yank and see what happens. I'm not expecting anything to happen. And then the second thing is I'm going to put this in the oven, and doggone, you know, my wife, she really annoys me. She's got a casserole in there, but at least she's preheated it for me. All right, I'm out in the garage. I'm a little ashamed of this redneck setup here, but since the table that I have this little press on is so wimpy, I've got the whole thing chained down to the front axle of my Moline tractor. So, and I got a cheater bar. And I'm ready to press. I have very little faith. The press is clamped onto that table. The drawer has to be open for clearance for the clamps. And notice that I have a jack under there to level it out. So let's see what happens. I don't expect much even with the cheater bar. Notice also I'm pressing on the steel shaft, not the brass bushing. Cheater bar, no confidence. Nope, she's not budging, just as I suspected. Now, step 2, I'm going to put it in the oven and heat it up to 350, so I'll be back in 30 minutes. Try it again, and I still only have 10% more confidence in that method, but we'll give her a try. I need a bigger press is what I need. It's 1 hour later, and it may not look any different, but it's 400 degrees. See what happens. She's given. I may be bottomed out now, so I'll have to take a look. I'm glad to get it apart. I just hope I can remember the right order of putting it back together. But the holes look a little bit scuffed up. Needs a good cleaning. So I'll get that all cleaned up with solvent. I probably should have marked the gears, but I did not. So it's put together the same way. Now this is still warm, but I have to get those two bearings off, so I'll use a puller on those. And both of them are really rough, just terrible. Well, all three bearings are bad, just no doubt about it. Someone suggested just re-lubricating, but no, you know, that's not right. When a bearing's that rough, it needs replacement. And bearings, this is probably about 50 or 60 bucks worth of bearings, I would suppose. But I want to get them sealed. All the gears look good. I hope that no, I do see some marks on these gears, on this gear. Hope it's all right. Next, using a puller, I'm going to try to get this small bearing off the shaft. It's coming off, but it isn't easy, and boy did it make a snapping sound when it first let loose. Looks like it has to get pulled all the way. I thought there would be some relief. It appears to be 17 millimeter. Alright, I got that one off, and boy it is nasty. Now for this one, and I'm just going to have to assume that it pulls off right over the gear. I think all of you watching know that most all bearings are metric. In other words, this one that I just took off is 40 millimeter OD, and if you wanted to check this, it's 12 millimeters. And the inside diameter here is 17 millimeter. Therefore, this shaft is, you might call it an odd size, but it's not odd at all. It also is 17 millimeters. Well, why am I telling you that? Because we know that this has a metric bore. I haven't looked up the size and everything, but the outside of this gear is basically 25 millimeters. So I'm assuming that the ID of the bearing is 25 millimeters and will come off. Well, I know it can't come off in this direction because this shaft here, hollow and all, is all one piece. So I'm going to pull from this way the same as I did on the previous bearing. You savvy? Well, the other puller didn't have the capacity, so I'll put the heavy-duty one to work here. I like this one. I don't see a brand on it, but look at, you pull out the pin, which has a little ball there, and move it up to whatever length you want or whatever width you want, and that quickly, without fiddling around with tools or any other frustrating things, you know, it's set for the job at hand. Notice that I usually put something here so I won't bugger up the shaft. That looks bad enough the way it is, so I like to set it up like that. Alright, there's the setup. As you saw, I had a couple things backwards. Make sure these pins are in all the way. And I'm ready to pull. And I find it easier to put this in the vise, or it can just be done on the bench, but usually you have to have something in there to counteract the forces. Alright, let's see what happens here. Boy, that won't stay in the vise. Got those soft jaws. It's separating. Now the mystery is gone. You know, when this thing was together, I had to plead for help, and we were guessing, and we were throwing out all kinds of ideas. But there we got bearings. 3 bad bearings. I'll clean this up, but the teeth feel a little rough, like they got sharp corners. But at least there's none missing. And I need to clean these up just well enough that I can read the bearing numbers. And there are the bearing numbers from small to medium to large, all new departures. 3203, 3L05, and 3205. First thing I will do is see if I have a bearing in stock. I got a whole can of bearings, but that would be a long shot, and then I'll get on the internet and order those bearings. Well, in fact, I did have a bearing that is the right size that corresponds with this. It's a different number. It's a Napa bearing. It is brand new, but you know, I'm not going to use it because it's just shielded, and it's only shielded on one side, but it is the right size. But these bearings are so cheap on the internet that I'm just going to go ahead and order them all. And from what I did, and I've already been on the internet, in fact, I've already ordered them, and they'll be here in about a week or so. But they're pretty much all new numbers. So I don't know if this is just an old numbering system or what, but they're new numbers, and they have a rubber shield on both sides, and you know, a rubber seal, I mean, not a shield. That is a shield. Sealed bearings are also permanently lubricated. Also, they tend to retain the heat, but I don't think that's going to be such a problem here. So the bearings are ordered, and before I conclude this video, let me talk a little bit more about the parts, and then the next video will be the reassembly. Okay, now for an examination and evaluation of all the various parts, and I've cleaned them up. They've been through the parts washer, through a solvent, and you know, I was just thinking with those bearings, I've got a huge box and then a coffee can, Folgers full of bearings, brand new in boxes like I just showed you, but they're never the right ones. I might as well just throw them out because in the end I buy new bearings. Well, that's just my thoughts on that. So here are the 4 planetary gears, and they are all in pretty good shape, and they all are identical. They do have a number on them, which might be just a parts number or what it is. I don't know, but this company, Pull Gear, probably purchased all the gears, I would be guessing. So those are in good shape with the brass bushings in them. Set those aside. They're all cleaned up nice. I cleaned up the pins. These are hardened, so appear to be just fine. Looking at this now, cleaned up. Remember, I have to drill and tap a new hole here later on. That's no good. That's where I had to remove the, that was in the first video, remove the set screw by drilling it out. You can see there is considerable wear, but not a thing I can do about that. That's been ground, that's ground, this is just a rough turn because it didn't matter. So this is good enough to reuse. I have no choice anyway. I don't know why I'm even saying that. Upon cleaning this, it's even much worse than what I thought. Just been beat up by Bubba so badly. And I just think it would be a total waste to have Jim weld these up. But I am going to have to try to dress these down because some of these corners are so rough that they will damage the belt. And even right here, look at that. Very rough. Now, as I told you, I'm going to drill. No, that's the other piece. Okay. And there's the access hole for that. You know, it's so easy to understand this all now that it's been disassembled, but it was such a mystery in its original assembled form. That, of course, is Bubba. when he originally started working on this. Looking at this piece now, I'd almost like to fill that with something. I wish I had some, maybe I'll put some JB weld or something in there and then just dress that off a little bit, because that's just so awful looking. You think that would throw it out of balance, but I'm going to drill a new hole probably on the opposite side for that stem, that rod that has to go in here to keep it from spinning. This brass bushing looks good, and here of course are the two oilers, and this hole and this hole is where the oil dripped in there. These holes here are not in good shape. There's a lot of galling that went on. Also quite a bit of electrolysis. I believe that's electrolysis that took its toll, unless this was a casting and there were defects in the casting, so I'm not real sure. But I'm going to dress this up, try to get some of that galling off that's on the surface. So there is wear here, but not a whole lot that can be done about that. But this looks pretty good here, and I'll clean out these holes. I should knock the oilers out, but I guess there's no need. I'll just blow some air and solvent, maybe some brake cleaner in there, and get that cleaned up. And I think when I reassemble it, I'm just going to use a good grade of gear lube on the gears, and then from time to time, of course, it would be lubricated through here. But I don't think that's adequate unless a person was putting some kind of gear lubricant in there, and I don't know what it called for in the original instructions. There probably was original instructions. I think somebody sent me some of that, but I'd like to put this in the lathe and break that corner, which is kind of rough, and if I would fill this, maybe even take a light cut if I could hold it true enough in the lathe so it didn't wobble. But this isn't going to be a complete restoration as some of you might take the time to do, but you know, I'm so busy making videos, and in general I do not like restorations, and I spent way more time on that Lyle drill grinder than I intended to, and that's not something I typically do, but I did carry that through, except for the severe beating that I took from some viewers saying that I should have changed the bearings. But of course you saw me use it, or you will see me use it, and grind drills with it, and it works just fine. So I'm going to conclude this video, this part, because the disassembly is done, and there'll be a delay here anyway as the bearings are shipped, and I hope they come in a timely manner so then I can start the reassembly. But I'll do some of the other work that I just described here before that comes. And you know, this is just so horrible that it probably should hold this in the big 3-jaw with reverse jaws and take a light cut and face this, just so it doesn't look too ugly. But I probably would have to take off so much that and this is the bearing, that the bearing would be exposed a little bit. Alright, thanks for watching part 2 of the pull gear project here, and I'll see you in the next part. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.